Hey everyone, PC here, and welcome to the December edition of the Conn Selmer Concert Artistry. And I'm so excited this evening to have one of my dear friends, Alfred Watkins. And he, after a 37-year career, he didn't quit. He's co-founder of the Minority Band Directors Association. He is founder and conductor of the Cobb Wind Symphony. He's an educational clinician for Conn Selmer. And that probably just lists 2 or 3 of the 100 things that he's doing to keep himself occupied. But in his career with the Lassiter High School Band, and if you ever had the opportunity to hear them, as I did many times, I'll never forget the time I adjudicated at the Cobb County Festival, and conductor Watkins was playing the Hindemith Symphony. And Alfred, I'll never forget that performance. It was a stunning performance, and it wasn't just all of the notes, but you had taught your kids to understand that music and the interpretation. Honestly, and I think I told you this, I've never heard a college band play it any better. And speaking of college bands, at one time, we tried to get Alfred to come and be on the University of Texas faculty. And I advised him not to, because I thought we had to do more than just conduct an athletic band. So we're glad he stayed where he was. But Alfred is dedicated to providing guidance and encouragement to the next generation of band directors. And it's not possible in this 20-minute segment to even begin to have Alfred share all the wisdom that he's acquired over the years. So what I asked him to do was to talk about something that we both feel is very important to success with your concert program, and that is chamber music. And Alfred, you attribute, I know, making chamber music an integral part of your program is one of the many reasons for the high level of musicianship that you achieved. So when and how did this come about, and how did you structure that program?
Well, thank you so much, Paula. It's just an honor and a pleasure to get a chance to visit with you again. And yes, I do recall interviewing for a job at University of Texas at Austin in 1980. Yeah, it was back in the late 1980s. And,
right.
And you suggested that I stay where I was. And it seemed to have worked out for me. And we kept a good relationship through the years. And thank you so much to Conn Selmer and the Conn Selmer Institute. And it's coming up. And thank you so much, everyone, for chiming in and listening in. The chamber music program in our schools, I think, is the cornerstone, or one of the most integral parts of our program at Lassiter and throughout my 37-year career. I believe in something that we call a private lesson approach to teaching the full band. So you teach from one to many. Oftentimes we get into the rat race of the everyday development, and we just want to teach the band, the notes and the rhythms and the drill or whatever the band happens to be. And so it's kind of like trying to herd the baby chicks across the street. You got 1,000 of them. And so what you want to do is teach them how to walk on their own. So the genesis of this comes from my undergraduate work at Florida A&M University. My trumpet professor did duets with us in every lesson from freshman year through maybe mid-senior year. And they became progressively more difficult. But in the interim, I was taking music theory and taking formal analysis, and I was learning that one-to-one counterpoint worked a certain way. And he endorsed it, and they endorsed it so much. I said, well, this must be something to it. So when I finished my undergraduate degree, I realized the value of one-to-one counterpoint, unison, form. And so I wrote down a few things that chamber music encourages just by playing a duet or a trio, and see if you as a band director don't need these skills in your group. Development of tone, independence of player, tuning of unisons, octaves, tuning of harmony, dynamic contrast, imitation, sequence, understanding of musical construction of soprano, alto, alto tenor, SATB, sight reading independence, dependence on others, part preparation, and it has a limited number of players. And so if your band doesn't need all those skills, then you should not listen past this point in this webinar, and you should go and find something else to do. But that was critical to me. And one of the most critical things, Paula, is I took a class in undergraduate school called Brass Quintet. I'm an old trumpet player. So I took one quarter system of brass quintet. There were 3 quintets in there. We changed players around once a week, and we must have played a zillion pieces of music with a teacher. The horn professor was the teacher of the class. And so I learned the value of the brass quintet or chamber music as an undergraduate student and fell in love with it, just fell in love with it. I first started my first school at Murphy High School. The students didn't play very well. And I had to get them on board for making music. They didn't read very well. They didn't play very well. It was a small little group of students in the inner city of Atlanta. But I had 3 flute players. I had 3 flute players that were 9th graders that could play a little bit. So I scrounged around in the music library where I started, and I found Henry Mancini's Fluter's Ball, a pseudo jazz piece that I gave to the flute players, and they kind of worked through it about an hour in my office. And before I knew it, students were peeping their head inside to find out what they were playing. It was a trio that they not much heard before, but it was jazzy. And we taught them the parts. We played that piece everywhere. We played it at the principal's faculty meeting. We played it at the principal's administration meeting. We played it at the superintendent's cabinet meeting. We played that little piece everywhere. And before I knew it, the students in that little band didn't play very well, kept saying, "Do you have one for me? Do you have something for me to play like that?" And that was the genesis of my chamber music career as an educator. When I moved off to Lassiter, I did the same thing. It was a second-year school. They had no chamber music program. So I found some kids that were hanging around the band during lunch and formed up a brass quintet in 1982, my very first year there. And they happened to have been the very best players in the band anyway. So I found some brass quintet music, got them, and we formed up a trombone quartet. And that's the beginning of my chamber music career at Lassiter High School. And it blossomed past that point. Eventually moved into, I wanted every child in the band program to experience playing in a chamber group. So every child at Lassiter for most of my years were required to play in a large choir, saxophone choir, trombone choir, tuba euphonium ensemble. They were coached by their contemporaries, by their section leaders. And many of them met before school. The older kids would go to the young kids' houses and pick them up because they couldn't ride the bus to do the rehearsals, and it became a part of our culture. And all I had to do as a teacher was to find suitable music that was easy, medium, and difficult for those choirs. What I did was to create a brass quintet, woodwind quintet, and within each classroom. So yes, they have brass quintet and woodwind quintets, grade 1. They have them very difficult. They have been grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. So my job was to research and find the material. So what do you find the material? Well, I called my college professors. And no one loves the bassoon like your bassoon professor. And so the bassoon professor would find the duets, the trios, and the bassoon choir. And so those are easy to find, some of them, but many of them are challenging. And that's how we began to build our library and to build an interest in doing it.
You know, and I remember coming to one of your marching band rehearsals, and before the kids started, they were all in little groups. I heard a flute quartet playing, and so you continue that all year long. It's just not something you did in the spring, right?
Well, yes, I said, well, let's just do this whenever children show up. And so I've always been bothered with the seasons that we go through. There's a marching season, there's a solo and ensemble season, there's a concert band season, there's a jazz season. And so state organizations don't mean any harm, but they'll give us a calendar of events that we should subscribe to give us a basic course of study. And so that's fine and works fine for many of them. So we started them off in marching band camp, actually. A classic marching band rehearsal would be with the coach coming in to do sectionals. 3-hour sections in the middle of the day, Monday through Thursday or so. And the kids can't play a 7 or 8 minute show for 3 hours. So they would do about a 45-minute to an hour master class on a technique. Then they would do the show music for about an hour and 15 minutes. And then the teacher was asked to bring in chamber music or large choir music for their section. So that's why you will see flute choir, flute quartets all over the field during football season. And we would use those quintets to play at faculty meetings, pre-planning meetings, and we would just construct performances for all those students to play. And it was commonplace for everyone to be in a large choir or quintet or quartet. And that was that. But we started it as soon as children showed up, because there's nothing greater than having a big old marching band ready to start rehearsal and have a tenor saxophone duo come up and play some tenor saxophone duet really, really well. The kids are enthusiastic. They'll clap. They'll love it. Then the next thing they'll say is, do you have anything for 2 snare drummers? Absolutely, I do. Come in my office tomorrow morning and we'll go through a few. And that's how the whole chamber music program evolved and developed.
Well, and you spend a lot of time teaching your kids to be leaders, because I noticed that a lot. They're very encouraging of each other, and you know that starts from day one. But you know, one of the things that I admire about you, Alfred, is that you've been the kind of teacher that if you don't know how to do something, you're not afraid to ask. And I think that there is a generation now that kind of thinks that, well, I'm supposed to know everything when I become a teacher. And if we can't learn from the best, and that's another thing now that you are dedicating the back half of your career to helping young ladies and gentlemen be better at what they do. And thank you so much for that, because it's that type of kind of pay it back, pay it forward that I think really makes a big difference. Do you, when you're thinking about planning your, I know your marching band was great, but I don't want to talk about that. But when you're planning your rehearsals and you're talking about, you hit on it just a little bit about how important tone is, and can you tie that in a little bit more to the chamber music? And you also mentioned having people come in and work with your sections.
Well, yeah, you can't do, and that typically happened in marching band activities. I had a lot of coaches. During the concert season, I actually did not. Mm-hmm. Every kid in the program, every student between January and March, during our focal time for preparing for evaluation, evaluations were mid-March, and each conductor was responsible for doing sectionals for their own band. Mm-hmm. I did band 1 and band 4. Somebody else may do 2, somebody else may do 3 and 5, but I did my own sections, which required me and required the assistants to study the pedagogy of instruments they didn't know. Yeah. So as a result of that, I became quite good in pedagogy at all of the instruments, because I had to keep up and stay slightly ahead of the student. So mm-hmm. We're teaching, if I'm working on the Hindemith Symphony, I've got a second oboe part that's dastardly difficult. And so I've got to learn how the instrument works, how the fork fingering works, and everything else. But you asked about tone. I learned early in my professional career that it was the essence and the signature of playing an instrument. If it doesn't sound good, no one wants to listen to it. A little ninth grader taught me that about, 50 years ago, 45 years ago. Charlotte White told me, and I was kind of fussing that the band wasn't practicing at home. And she was like a little junior. She came in my first office, and she said, Mr. Watkins, she said, I don't mind practicing at home, but I don't sound good. So I don't want to listen to it if I don't sound good. And I went, oh. So I went through the process of teaching them, all of my bands, how to breathe, the function of the lungs, the function of the embouchure, photographs, pictures, diagrams. This is the way the tongue works. Everything pedagogically that they would have gotten in applied studies or a private lesson. It didn't matter if they were first year All-State or couldn't put the instrument together. They all got the same treatment. And so I made sure that everyone understood how to produce the sound, how the body produced it, and how the ear heard the smoothest, clearest, evenest, most resonant tone. And that was a part of my conversation every day as a band director. Didn't matter what band it was. That was every day as a band director. And without a good tone, it does, nothing matters past that point. You can't tune it. The embouchure is not working. It doesn't articulate. It doesn't blend. It doesn't get in balance. Everything goes bad. And and most interestingly, Paula, the future of the performer gets hindered as a result of that. We're handicapping children by allowing them or encouraging them to play poorly. We're destroying their future. We don't know what they could end up being, but we destroyed them by letting them not play with a beautiful sound and not encouraging it. A part of that is their audio memory. And there's so many tools now that a student can hear a good sound. You could play a recording of James Galway right now, and we could recognize the beauty of his sound. We don't necessarily have to be in the room with them anymore. We used to back in the olden days, but not anymore. There are beautiful sounds everywhere, but we can put them in our students' ears.
Isn't it interesting, though, and I know you've had this experience, you go out and do a clinic, and let's just say, for example, the clarinet section is not the strongest section in the band. So you look at the clarinets and you say, name a great football player, and they'll tell you their favorite quarterback, and name a great pop star, and they'll tell you, name a great clarinet player, and you can hear crickets cheep. And there's no excuse these days not to have kids have those sound models.
And it happens on the university level. They know the model sounds of their instrument.
Mm-hmm.
They'll know Julian Bliss. They'll know Jean-Pierre Paul. They'll know all those. But you ask them another instrumentalist, and their music ed majors, they won't have a clue. And so we have to make sure that we teach them comprehensive musicianship and develop comprehensive musicianship skills. And it starts the first day that they're in our classrooms.
Right. And bravo and again, what a masterclass from you to say that you do all your own sectionals and you learn how to teach the instruments. I mean, how else can we do that?
Well, I can also measure their present and their growth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem in a pitch in the clarinet players on a throat B flat. I know that Charlotte's playing it high because she played it high yesterday.
Right.
And I said, Charlotte, is that you? And she'll say, yes, sir, Miss Watkins, I'll get it down.
Right.
A little light little conversation, and the next time I'm listening for it because I've already coached them and I can measure their progress. I didn't need outside people to tell me how to develop my skills of my students. I found that bothersome. They can't put the sounds into the ensembles. They don't know my interpretation. They don't know note lengths. When I did my own sectionals, I learned the note lengths, and more importantly, I was learning to hear the score. I was learning to hear exactly what the score should sound like when it was really well defined. So when you teach the Hindeman Symphony, you can just teach them in a little small group. And well, this is this section. This is the section turned upside down. Let's call that an inversion. Okay, it's fine. Let's lengthen it out. Let's call it an augmentation. Okay. They're taking high levels of mathematics. They're taking high levels of science. They're gonna be the greatest in the world, and we teach them as if they can't think.
Amen.
Yeah, and so the small groups were very helpful to that, and the concert band was the place to teach that.
Mm-hmm.
That is our classroom. It's not the marching band, and the jazz band is not the same place for that.
Right. Well, you also hit on something else, and that is that you taught your fourth band.
Yes.
And I think that's so important too. We used to, when I taught in high school, my assistant and I used to always want to teach the fourth and fifth band because those kids made the most progress.
That's exactly right.
But the other side of that, and I think so many people who just do the top band don't realize that if you don't give those kids attention, not only is your program not going to get as strong as it could be, but they wind up feeling like second-class citizens. You know,
you couldn't be more correct. And I think being African American in American society has helped me to understand what being treated as a second-rate citizen or have my family's treated that way. And I certainly wasn't going to endorse it as a classroom teacher. And so the depth of a program says that every child should have the potential to be great. But we say it a lot. It's easy to say, it's easy to write down on a piece of paper. It's terribly difficult to do it and to believe that you're doing it. But at Lassiter, I believe that every child was important. I'll give you a quickie. I had a student that came in one year, I won't call his name out because he's still playing he plays in the community band. He was a 62nd chair clarinet. And he had been ignored in the middle school. And we gave him practice reports to do to motivate the practicing. And he was overboard with it. And by the third year, he went from last year in the fifth band to second chair in the first band.
Oh my gosh.
Went to Georgia Tech, majored in, I think, engineering. He's been a member of my community band now for about 17 years. Lifelong player, lifelong learner, but he was important for me to learn. He was important. So every child is important and was important in my classroom. And I wanted to give them individually the best that I could. And that's what chamber music comes in. You can't do it there in the clarinet section of 12. You can't do it there in the saxophone section of 9. You can say we have a great saxophone section, but that every child deserves that opportunity. Plus, you create wonderful depth that way. You have a really good band for a long time.
Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. As I say, you and I talk this way all the time, which is great because we're such kindred spirits. But in about the last minute, Alfred, do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with? And thanks so much for sharing.
I think I just did. Make sure you realize that the more, the merrier. Give your children individual skills. And give them high standards of individual skills, and they will enjoy the program longer, and they will stay with it longer, and they'll continue to play for the rest of their lives, like the student I just mentioned. And make sure that you create an exciting, invigorating, yet challenging course of study. Play it's 10 and 20 and 30, 50 pieces of music a year. 75 pieces of music a year. Play music for study and music for performance, not just music for performance. And you're giving them the gift of music through a very broad vocabulary.
Oh, Alfred, thank you so much. We're going to have you back because we want to talk about some other things too. But for those of you who are watching, or those of you who come back and watch it later, anytime you have a chance to watch this man rehearse or give a clinic, and he's going to be giving clinics at the Conn Selmer Institute this summer. And when he's not giving an hour-long clinic, he's walking around and sharing his ideas too. So I hope some of you haven't signed up yet. It's still early bird, and I think until January 1st. But Alfred, again, I can't tell you how much I admire your career and your dedication and your heart. And that shows in everything that you do. So thank you. Have a great holiday season. I hope to see you at Midwest. And Beth, if you will end this, Alfred and I will visit just a little bit more as well.
Thank you so much, Paula.
Thank you.